Is oil the root of every war? It is a tempting answer. It feels clean. It feels cynical. And sometimes it feels true. But oil caused the war is usually a shortcut. Oil is rarely the only reason. Oil is more like a force multiplier. It can fund power. It can buy weapons. It can move markets. It can punish rivals without firing a shot. And sometimes oil is not the motive. It is the lever. So, treat the question seriously, not with slogans, with dates, with patterns, with mechanisms, what happened, why it matters, what to watch. Start with one foundational week, September 10th to September 14th, 1960. In Baghdad, 5 countries created OPEC: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. This did not start wars, but it changed the balance. Because it turned oil from a commodity into a political instrument, producers could coordinate, set terms, and respond as a bloc. From that point on, oil was not just extracted, it was negotiated, and sometimes weaponized. Now the first moment the world felt the oil weapon. October 6, 1973. Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War against Israel. Then October 20th, 1973. Arab oil producers imposed an embargo targeting the United States and others. This is when many governments learned a hard lesson. You can fight a war with tanks and jets, and still lose leverage to a barrel of crude. The embargo lasted into March 1974. The military war was regional, but the economic shock was global. Gas lines, inflation, recession pressure, political crises inside consumer states. Oil did not cause that war. But oil amplified what the war did to the world. It forced governments to treat energy security as national security. That is the first pattern. Oil turns local conflict into global stress. Now, move forward. August 2nd, 1990. Iraq invaded Kuwait. There were multiple motives: debt disputes, border claims, regional dominance. But oil sat at the center of the stakes. Kuwait was not just territory. It was production capacity. It was reserves. It was pricing power. When Iraq took Kuwait, the world saw a nightmare scenario. One actor controlling too much supply. One actor able to threaten the Gulf's export arteries. So the response became international. By January 17, 1991, the Gulf War air campaign began. Again, oil did not explain every decision, but oil made the cost of inaction look unacceptable. That is the second pattern. Oil turns certain aggressions into system-level threats, and system-level threats pull in coalitions. Now here is where people get sloppy. They see 2 examples and conclude oil explains everything. It does not. Many wars have little oil relevance. Civil wars over identity, territorial disputes far from major reserves, power struggles inside states. So the better question is not, does oil cause all wars? The better question is, when does oil change the probability of war? And the answer is incentives. Oil changes incentives in 4 ways. First, revenue. Oil revenue can keep regimes alive. It can buy loyalty. It can finance security forces. It can sustain long conflicts. Second, choke points. Oil moves through narrow corridors, straits, pipelines, ports. Those points are fragile. Fragility attracts coercion. Third, price shock. Oil is priced globally. Even distant conflict can spike prices. Price spikes reshape domestic politics everywhere. Fourth, sanctions and enforcement. Energy trade becomes a battlefield. Restrictions can cripple budgets. Workarounds can finance war. Enforcement can escalate tensions. These mechanisms matter more than the slogan. Now bring it into the modern era. September 26, 2022. Explosions damaged the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea. No matter who did it, the effect was clear. Energy infrastructure became a strategic target. Energy dependence became a vulnerability. This was not a classic war for oil. This was conflict using energy as leverage. Gas supply uncertainty, industrial costs, political debate inside Europe. That is the third pattern. In modern conflict, energy is often a pressure tool, not the prize. Now bring it right up to the present. February 26, 2026. Russia launched a large-scale overnight assault on Ukraine, targeting energy infrastructure and rail systems. That date matters because it shows a repeated tactic. When you hit the grid, you hit industry. When you hit industry, you hit logistics. When you hit logistics, you hit the ability to resist. Energy infrastructure becomes a battlefield because it is civilian and strategic at the same time. Factories slow, repairs divert manpower, budgets strain, public morale is tested. Again, this is not oil starting the war. It is energy shaping the war. So by now the answer should be clearer. Oil is not the root of every war, but oil can do three dangerous things. It can raise the stakes, it can fund endurance, it can spread shock far beyond the front line. Now be precise about language. People mix three different stories together. Story 1. Wars to control oil fields or reserves. Territory equals resources. Resources equal power. It happens, but it is not the default. Story 2. Wars enabled by oil revenue. This is less cinematic, often more important, because it is not about the first strike. It is about the budget that makes the second and third strike possible. Oil revenue can weaken the normal bargain between a state and its people. If leaders do not need broad taxes, they do not need broad consent. That can reduce accountability. It can make repression affordable. It can let a regime survive isolation and sanctions longer than outsiders expect. And it can keep armed groups supplied even when the wider economy is failing. That does not mean oil creates the hatred. It means oil can keep the violence funded. Story 3. Wars where oil is used as leverage. Embargoes, pipeline threats, shipping risks, sanctions games. This is the modern pressure system. If you confuse these stories, you get bad analysis and bad predictions. So the honest answer is layered. Oil is not the universal cause, but oil is a reliable accelerator. Now, why does this matter right now? Because energy security is tightening again. Supply chains are reorganizing. Energy transitions are uneven. Demand remains high in many regions. Spare capacity is not infinite. That means markets are jumpier, and jumpy markets amplify crises. A missile does not need to hit a refinery for prices to rise. Prices can rise because insurers get nervous, because shipping reroutes, because traders price in risk. This creates a political feedback loop. High fuel prices hit voters quickly. They hit transport. They hit food. They hit manufacturing. Governments under price pressure become less flexible. They look for fast solutions. They take harder positions. They blame external actors. That is how energy becomes political oxygen. So, return to the core question. Is oil the source of every war? But here is the sharper statement. Oil is one of the most reliable ways to turn a conflict into a global crisis. Because oil sits at the intersection of three systems: security, economics, domestic politics. A regional conflict can be contained militarily and still spill into the global economy through energy. When the global economy is stressed, global politics hardens. That is the pathway. Now the practical part, what to watch. If you want to know whether oil is becoming the driver in a given conflict, watch specific signals. Signal 1, targets. Are combatants hitting energy infrastructure? Refineries, export terminals, pipelines, storage depots, power stations tied to extraction and transport. When energy assets become routine targets, the conflict is entering economic warfare territory. Signal 2, choke point risk. Watch the major corridors: the Strait of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, the Suez Route, the Turkish Straits, key pipeline junctions. You do not need a blockade to create shock. You only need sustained uncertainty. Signal 3, insurance and freight, war risk premiums, freight rates, rerouting behavior. When insurers price risk sharply higher, they are telling you something before politicians admit it. Signal 4, sanctions, escalation, and enforcement. Not announcements. Enforcement, secondary sanctions threats, seizures, shipping compliance actions, financial restrictions on buyers. These measures can strangle revenue and trigger retaliation. Signal 5, spare capacity and strategic reserves. If spare capacity is tight, markets have less cushion. If strategic reserves are being drawn down, governments have less room. Tight cushions make crises louder. Signal 6, domestic politics and major consumers. Watch elections, watch subsidy decisions, watch price controls. Watch protests over fuel costs, because when fuel politics gets hot, foreign policy can shift fast. Now close it cleanly. Oil is not the root of every war, but oil changes what war does to the world. It changes how long wars can last. It changes who can afford escalation. It changes how quickly a regional conflict becomes a global economic problem. And the most dangerous moments are not always when oil is the prize. They are when oil is the lever, an embargo, a pipeline cutoff, a choke point incident, a refinery strike, a sanctions clampdown. Those moves can create pressure across continents in days. So the real lesson is this: if you want to understand modern conflict, do not ask only who fired first. Also ask, who controls energy flows? Who can disrupt them? Who benefits from price shock? And who collapses under it? Those questions will not explain everything, but they will explain why some wars stay local and why others shake the whole system. Word count 955.